Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and this is a video that ideally I'd like to make a video essay on this topic, but I've got a lot of stuff coming up, so I'm not 100% sure when I'll get the time. But I thought it would be relevant for this channel because we talk about trauma dynamics, dysfunction, and holding empathy, right? I'm a Christian, you don't have to be a Christian to hold empathy for people, but I believe in understanding people, forgiveness, and extending grace. And something in Christianity is that you pray for your enemies because it's this understanding that the people who hurt you have probably been hurt in their turn. Something I try to live by, which I think helps you as a person as well, is trying to think, okay, well, I don't know whatever happened with them, but I hope that they heal so that they don't hurt anybody else. Personally, I feel like I would have just completely crumbled to bits as a person if I didn't try and hold empathy for people. That doesn't mean to excuse their actions, but I try to understand them. I try to pray for them and their healing and hope that I believe there's enough good in this world that people aren't born bad, right? People are the sum of their circumstances and partly their personality, but there's a lot of factors at play, and I believe that nobody is ever too far gone. Even the worst person in the world has still got the opportunity until their last day to do something differently, right? Every single day is an opportunity for that. I believe that very strongly. So let's talk Succession. Succession is my massive big thing that I love, and we just had the penultimate episode. Let's talk about Logan Roy. So I'm not going to give loads of explanation. This is for people who watch the show. What we got in the penultimate episode ever of Succession was we finally got a bit of an explanation as to what happened with Logan's little sister, Rose. So there's three siblings. There's Ewan, who's older by Logan than 1.5 years, Logan, and then they had a baby sister, Rose. And throughout the show, Rose has been mentioned every so often. We know that Logan has blamed himself for something that happened to Rose. We had no idea like how old Rose was when she died or anything like that. We've just known that's been in the background. Now what they've actually done is, rather than leave this open, is they've explained what basically happened. The big brother explained it at Logan's funeral. And something I love about Succession, and there should be a video essay for this, is that what it does is it kind of puts you in that uncomfortable place that is so necessary, I think, which is getting you to empathise with people who are otherwise morally corrupt, right? It makes you feel, it forces you to look at the humanity of people who do evil. Not necessarily because they are evil, and the concept of evil in itself is complicated, but because there's an evil in people who are complicit, right? In people who let things happen, in people who put profits ahead of human beings, in people who cut off their empathy and don't see other human beings as full people. And something Succession does, which I'm a socialist and also as a Christian, something that just really works for me, is it refuses to let you hate the characters, right? Because sure, they're involved in this awful, right-wing news channel. A fascist president has been elected in the Succession world, and because it's so immediate as well, there's something Game of Thronesy about the kind of power plays in Succession, but because it's modern day, you can't remove yourself. It's not like it's not like dragons and castles. It's real world harm that we can understand, but it absolutely refuses to let you make a complete villain of any of the characters. And it puts you in this space where you empathize with them very strongly and you kind of grieve their humanity, which is so clever, I think, because this is a show that does not excuse its characters. It really gets in your face with that. It will say to you, you like this person, don't you? You can see their capacity for good, but look what they're doing instead. Like, it makes you face that feeling. So I get frustrated when some people watch the show and they say, oh, there was a couple of tweets and stuff going around saying like, oh, how could you root for any of these characters? They're this and they're that. And I feel like it's missing the point. The very point of the show, from my perspective, is to make us examine these systems and see that the systems are wrong. Right? You have to kind of trace things back, because this is a story of generational trauma in a family. And it's also tied to billionaires and capitalism, right? And it's showing how these systems are full of broken people, traumatized people, who have never really emotionally matured, and they've made the wrong choices. And, as Ewan says in his speech, at some point they stop trying. And it's so much more challenging to us to look at these people and these corporations and not just go evil, but not excuse them either, but to say this is how, right? It's unacceptable, but I see it. For me, it's this really, really brilliant, scathing critique of these figures that with all their wealth and their power, you know, are kind of worshipped because of their money, and really because of the world that they're in. You know, in order to get that high up in the system, you have to give up little pieces of your humanity. They are miserable in it anyway. They're always searching for something and they're never getting their needs met. But also it's really childish, because emotional maturity means that you wouldn't be part of that system in the first place. So it is a real challenge to watch, honestly, because you will find yourself feeling the most conflicting feelings, and I just think it's very, very smart. And the fact it makes people uncomfortable is a sign of how good it is, personally. I think if people aren't at times empathizing with the characters, personally, this is just my opinion, I don't think they're appreciating it correctly. I know you can't say what's the correct way to appreciate something, but from my perspective, I'm a writer myself, I think that's the point. It's constantly putting you in that awkward situation. So what they've given us in Logan is a character who is very easy for us to see as the villain. And he is the villain, you know. In his own mind, he's not. But that's the important part. In his own mind, he is not the villain. But we see this through the lens of his children, who are so emotionally traumatized and abused and neglected in different ways. They're scared of him, but they do love him. You know, from that lens, we are seeing that this is a guy who is quite monstrous, right? What he's done is horrible. He's making the world a worse place. He's hurting his children, you know, and it's really easy to see that and think, you know, Logan is the big villain, which he is the big villain. But the important thing is that he doesn't see himself as the villain, and he himself is part of a complex system. So the show is trying to tell us that, you know, generational trauma, if we don't heal ourselves from trauma, if we don't reparent our inner children, if we don't address these things, there is a very, very real danger, like what we're seeing with Kendall, which is breaking my heart, spoiler alert, of repeating the same behaviours. And not because people are evil, not because people are evil, but because it's very complicated. In some ways, I think, in Kendall's perspective, this is not a character study on Kendall, but he doesn't want to accept the extent to which he was abused by his father, especially now his father's gone. I think that would be too painful for him. You know, I think the children all struggle with kind of, in abuse situations, I'll say it like this, we think of abusers as all evil all the time, right? But a lot of people who are abusive parents or caregivers, for example, it is not that they don't love their children. So this is something that Brian Cox has said in interviews, and some people have not liked this very much, but in this instance, I think he's correct. So he said that when he took the role, he asked Jesse Armstrong, he really needed to know, does this man love his children? And Jesse Armstrong said yes. And Brian Cox talks a lot about how Logan fiercely loves those children. And a lot of people don't understand about abuse and trauma dynamics is that it's not a lack of love. It can be a lack of healthy love, right? A recycled love, which is abusive. So for example, if your love from your caregiver was love but with abuse at the same time, you may, thinking that it's all love, then pass that on to your own children. But because you're not going to want to accept that what you got was abusive, you are going to think that's love. And, you know, when we look at abuse dynamics as well, this myth that abusers don't love their victims, it's not a healthy love, because we shouldn't abuse people we love. But it is, in their minds, it is a sort of control love, right? And it comes often from an insecurity. I don't say that to excuse it. It's almost a possessive love, right? It's control. It's wanting people to be with you. Sometimes because you want them around you, you feel small and you want these people under your control. So the thing that we see time and time again with Logan is he can behave abusively, he can be neglectful, he can humiliate his children, he physically has hurt Roman, he breaks them down. But consistently, his character, as played by Brian Cox, loves his children, right? And that makes people uncomfortable in itself. I don't think you can argue that he doesn't love his children. He adores his children. He is just, in some ways, it's like he's loved them into complete collapse because the love he had was not healthy. So, and the show isn't like overly obvious, it lets you make up your own, come to your own conclusions about things. But what they've given us in this funeral episode, essentially, is Logan's trauma. So having Ewan make this speech out of nowhere, this is a man who is the only character still present who knew Logan when he was still a little boy. And remember, a theme in this series is that, we see a sort of childish side to Roman's a great example. Roman does awful things. You know, he really does. There's no excusing the things Roman does or says, and he supports fascism and stuff, not even because he really supports it, but just because the world's a playground, all that kind of stuff. But we really are shown that sort of difference between this wisecracking protection he's got that he gives to people and the fact that he's actually a really, really broken child, right? He's still in that broken child zone. So he really represents that for us. And putting this speech from Ewan in the same episode where Roman goes back into that child state, for me, is genius. Because we have not followed Logan the way we followed Roman, for example. And I mean, look, Kendall and Shiv as well. I think Kendall is the protagonist. Is he going completely bad? It seems like it. But we have empathised with him so much because we can see this sort of broken person who is trying and seems to have now given up trying because it's too painful. But Ewan tells the story of Logan as a little boy, and that's jarring, right? Especially because when you see Ewan go up there, you expect that Ewan's gonna kind of rip into him, which he also kind of does, but he does it with love. Ewan is consistently one of the most, well, he's one of the morally consistent characters in the show, right? He holds a position, he's principled, and he's been this kind of, I'd say him and Rava are probably two of the only characters that have been like that throughout the show. So what we hear from Ewan is unexpected, because he tells us the story of Logan when Logan was, I believe, 4.5 years old. So that's already jarring. Like, we know Logan as this formidable, scary force. You know, there's a line in this episode where Roman says that he made him breathe funny. The fear that people had around him, he is a force to be reckoned with. He's terrifying, right? Logan is terrifying and has become monstrous. And then right there in that moment, right, we've been following his children and the mess that's become of their lives because of his abuse and neglect, and the way that they have become like him in some way and tried to be unlike him in other ways, and it's really messed them up. We go straight in with the image of him as a little boy. So let's look at his childhood trauma. Let's actually look at this. Okay, so when Logan and Ewan are actually coming over in the first place, so I believe they're in like a boat, they're in like a holding part in the boat, right, at the bottom. And the convoy goes off without them. And they are told as little children that if they make a noise, if they breathe too loudly, if they speak, then they might get blown up by a U-boat, right? This is during the war. So Ewan says that it was him and Logan. Ewan was 5, I believe. I think there's like a year between them. And they communicate with their eyes. And I believe this happened for a couple of days. So that in itself is a huge trauma. But it's not just a sad story, you know, psychologically in terms of trauma, how has that, and I love how the show lets you figure this out for yourself, but how has that played into Logan's worldview, right? That particular instance. So in that moment, at a very formative age, right? This is under 5 years old, this is 4.5 years old. You've got Logan realising that you don't move, you don't speak, you don't do anything. Because if you do, if you show any sort of humanity or vulnerability, you're going to die. And in that situation, it's a very real thing, right? For a child, if I show that I'm a human being and show vulnerability, I will literally die. And not just me, we will all die. And that's not even to mention that at that young age, he's being sent somewhere else, right? Even though it's technically for his own benefit, those are young children that are being sent away to somewhere else. And you see that in kids who get sent away to boarding school, right? As we're going to get to with Logan again. So then they get some money. So they go and stay with the aunt and uncle, and some money is made, and Logan is sent off to a school, like a different school. Now, I believe that with Roman, we had a similar thing happening, because Roman is also the middle child. They really make sure that in this episode you kind of see the parallels, I think, with Roman and Logan. Logan is sent away. We're not sure why. It might be because he showed some sort of brilliance. We just don't know. It might be because he was more cutthroat than Ewan. All we know is that he was sent off to a school and he hated it. So this is a lonely and traumatised boy who's in a completely different place. He's lost his brother, who's his protector, and he's gone off to this school. And, you know, in those days, the schools, you know, where he was, I doubt he was treated very well. If you read, for example, I'm reading the biography of Charles at the moment, King Charles now, and the abuse that happened very often at those schools, and they just considered normal. You know, the boys were abused into complicity and then into arrogance and entitlement, and it's this awful, horrible chain. That's why you get so many people who come from those backgrounds who then seem to take positions in the world which allow them to hurt other people. But what happened in that situation is that Logan was like Roman. So Logan is upset. He's very vulnerable. I believe Ewan says that he like mewed and cried, and he got so upset and he wasn't allowed to go home. This is a lonely, scared child. And he was so determined to come home that he made it back by himself. And you're rooting for Logan in this story. The way that Ewan tells it, everything we've ever thought in this show, it's a tragedy, because we're thinking, okay, that's basically Kendall and Roman, right? And it's thinking, oh no, like, Kendall and Roman, Kendall especially, is heading into a Logan-like place. Like, we don't want to think about that. But in that situation, it's the same as when he had to be silent, otherwise they'd get killed by a torpedo, right? Because he shows vulnerability. He is emotional, and as a consequence of this, you know, in his own mind, he'll be thinking, I was weak, I couldn't hack it, you know, I wasn't man enough, I came home, and what happens? His little sister dies of polio, and we don't know if it was because of Logan or not, but obviously, you know, even if he passed it on, it's not his fault, he's just a child. So again, as a child, he then thinks that the death of something very innocent. So we know the way he talks about Rose seems to be that he loved Rose. You know, Rose was an innocent baby. And Ewan says that their aunt and uncle, Uncle Noah, who we feel like we know was very physically abusive to Logan, even though Logan seems to fear and respect him when he talks about him, you know, but Logan's got those kind of wounds on his back, hasn't he? They did nothing to disabuse Logan of the notion that he had killed his own baby sister. Nothing. It seems like the only person who ever tried to comfort him was Ewan. And we know what became of their relationship. We know that Logan felt that Ewan was too soft. You know, it's sort of like a death of the soul, isn't it? That in order to step into these positions of power and wealth where you hold people's lives in your hands, you have to sacrifice your soul. Your soul has to die. Your empathy has to die to get to that point. So those two particular stories that Jesse Armstrong has written for Ewan to tell, the two boys having to be silent, otherwise they're going to get blown up, and the one time he really shows the vulnerability, he breaks down, potentially with the trauma he couldn't have shown at that time. His weakness, in quotation marks, in his mind led to the death of somebody that he loved. So something we've seen with Logan consistently in his parenting of the children is he sees their vulnerability as something dangerous and bad, right? He reacts very explosively to it, to the extent that, you know, Roman couldn't breathe properly around him, and Kendall always seems very checked out, or he did with his father, didn't he? He didn't show emotion, he didn't give it. But when we look at it in the context of Logan's history, and this is no excuse because he's a grown adult doing this, in his own mind, he genuinely probably thinks that that's how you make somebody stronger, that's how you help them survive. That sort of vulnerability in a man, it's toxic masculinity, right? It's being recycled onto his sons. It's the pain that he had, and in his own weird way, he's trying to sort of save them from the pain, weirdly, by being their abuser, right? When you think about Roman and how Roman was sent away, and obviously his son's perspective of it is that, you know, you send you've got two dogs, you want them to fight, you know, or you send one away, you know, you make the weaker one fight the stronger one, etc. But I guess the show is asking us, especially with what we've seen happening with Kendall, which is a very real love for his children, which is becoming something monstrous and harmful to them, but from his perspective is about love. Him sending Roman away, that really, you know, it messed Roman up. But in his own mind, he's thinking, you know, I needed that to toughen me up. I needed that lesson. In a weird way, it's like, you know, his little sister was vulnerable and she died. Right, that's the truth of it. As a child, he saw vulnerability literally killed you. If you weren't strong enough in this world, if you were innocent and you were good, right, like a baby, you just died. You know, there was no reasoning, nothing like that. He understood the system young, and he thought, right, I can't have my children be vulnerable, because vulnerability equals death. Right? Vulnerability is, you can't show it. You show vulnerability and they'll torpedo you. You'll die. You'll die right there. I don't want that for my children. So he bullies his children and he abuses his children out of their vulnerability. And he is inflicting so much pain on them. And also conversely, because it's emotionally immature, when we look at trauma, he's actually making them more vulnerable, right? Because it's more healthy to be able to express your emotions. If you're someone who has to kind of hide emotions because you think they're weak, especially in men and boys, when men and boys are told, oh, you know, don't show your emotion. It's like with Roman. We've seen Roman over the course of this season. All that stress and trauma has nowhere to go. He's so edgy and he always says the most awful things because he's always kind of trying to desensitize himself, right? He's trying to distance himself from any sort of human feeling, right? Like, it makes him feel sick because presumably he was so abused for showing it in the past. It makes him feel physically ill to be sincere. So it's rare to see that sort of sincerity with Roman, and if you do get it, he can't help but make jokes to protect himself at the same time. It quite literally makes him ill, right? It makes him sick. And what we see with Roman in this episode is that what Logan wanted was to build strong men. And I'll say strong men because Shiv, you know, Logan is in a sexist system. I don't even know if he believes in that system, but he has found out a way to move within it and he goes with it. So I think he did love Shiv, but in a different sort of protector-like way. But he wanted to raise strong sons, right? Sons that would be able to deal with the world and be just like him. And in some ways, he's abused them just like he was abused. So they are like him. They have his worst qualities. But what he's also done, which is kind of worse, is he's denied them any sort of individuality, right? They are so afraid of their own emotions that it's destroyed them. Like, Roman is now, after a lifetime of hiding those emotions away, he falls apart on the screen. It's shown to everyone in the church and he breaks down, right? Like a child. And I don't mean that it's wrong for him to show emotion, but he can't deal with it because he's not been taught to deal with it properly. And Kendall's gone the other way because Kendall can't deal with emotion. So if you'll notice that Kendall's strategy seems to be that he just blocks it out. He often has that, you know, the 1,000-yard stare, doesn't he, Kendall? He seems like he's very much lost inside himself and he's kind of distant from things. So his protection mechanism is to completely check out. And that's why sometimes Kendall, although he's often our protagonist, can be frightening because he can detach himself completely from the reality of what's going on around him. And this directly comes from the abuse of him and Roman in their childhood, right? And I'm not saying that Connor and Shiv weren't also abused, but specifically looking at Logan and Ewan and the very sort of patriarchal world they're in. You know, if you think about Connor, and I saw an amazing video essay the other day about how one of the biggest tragedies in Succession is that Connor would have been an amazing substitute father figure to those kids, but they're kind of taught to devalue him, right? And I've been thinking about that myself as well. And it's interesting that I think Logan is quite a jealous character. You know, I think abusive people are. I think he wants to possess his children and to have them, like, you know, he wanted custody of them rather than their mother, right? Did he treat them well? No, but he loved them and he wanted them. You know, they were like his possessions and he wanted to protect them in his own weird way, which is what we're seeing Kendall now try to do with his own kids. But he's obviously undermined Connor all these years. You know, the relationship between Roman and Connor, I think, was a threat. I mean, he's obviously tried to separate Kendall and Roman to try and... He wanted them to see each other as competition because in his own mind he wanted to make them strong. He wanted these two boys that were able to kind of fight it out. You know, Marsha calls him and Ewan like two mighty stags, like at war. That's what he wants in his mind. But what he's actually created is just two deeply traumatised men who actually can't even really do what he did and be a successor like him. Because at least with Logan, he was the visionary, right? He was an awful person, but he was a doer. He went out, he did things, he found his identity, and he fought. He has actually stopped his own sons from accessing that side of themselves. So all they can ever really do is try and emulate him, right? If they want to get on in that world. But he devalued Connor. You know, it's not a coincidence that I think he wanted to show his homophobia, for example. And there's something to be said about, I think, possibly Kendall and Roman don't 100% seem straight to me. I don't know. Also, there's something about, you know, men expressing soft emotions to each other and being gentle. He dismisses, right? So Logan is also quite sexist. You know, he dismisses women for their feelings. Hence Shiv's tragic character, which is trying to be the cool girl, and you know, it's all right. You know, yeah, all those other girls, they're rubbish, but I'm one of the boys, right? And she's only going to get eaten up and devalued in that system, and ultimately, you know, become like her mother. But Connor's been devalued. His sensitivity has been devalued, and so his siblings do not respect him. And I think that was conscious on the part of Logan, honestly. And I think he could see that sensitivity in Connor, and I think that's why he kept him distant, because I think he did love him in his own way. But I think that vulnerability just unnerved him. You know, that kind of gentleness does not make Logan feel good. You know, you'll often notice that when in scenes together, it's like he can't look at Connor properly. It's like he can't look at him in the eyes, and I don't know, I wonder if he reminds him a little of Ewan in some ways. You know, that kind of soft older brother who's trying to parent the others, maybe? I don't know. Sorry, this is all over the place. Like, I really should have written notes and stuff. You know, when the waiter dies, and Logan kind of comes in, and sure, he uses it to manipulate Kendall, but honestly speaking, I think that in his mind, he is showing love in whatever way, in whatever he thinks love is, you know, in the best way that he possibly can. Because if you think about him being a child and feeling like he was responsible for the death of a baby, right, his own sister who he loved, and the people around him, basically, apart from Ewan, they don't try and reassure him about that. You know, when you start to think about the things he said to Kendall, I know he said awful things as well. He has also said to him that, you know, it wasn't your fault, it's over, like, no real person was harmed, I will look after you. And I just think there's a real tragedy in Logan, and in that speech that Ewan gives, just, it's a man who did try. I don't know, I think a triumph of this show is making you empathise, or at least try to understand one of the most abusive characters, one of the most manipulative and harmful characters I've seen on anything in a long time. With what he had emotionally, he has destroyed his children, but he was trying. And that's really sad, but he was trying. But again, the show doesn't excuse him of this. You know, in this speech, Ewan talks about these things. You know, that kind of sits with you as a viewer, and you don't know what to think, because you're thinking, this was one of the most evil characters I've seen. But he's just part of a chain. He's just part of a chain, and how abuse can breed more abuse. You know, when they say hurt people, people who are hurt and aren't allowed to process their hurt and never learn that emotions are okay will go on to re-victimize other people. And what we're seeing is all these world leaders in this room, like the most important people, they're there to celebrate this so-called giant. And yet Ewan gets up there, he's not supposed to be giving the speech, and he talks about a scared child. And Logan has been that scared child his entire life. And because he never worked through that trauma, because he's always been that child, he is bringing down, in his case, democracy. I just think it's a really stunning choice from Jesse Armstrong, because you know, Jesse Armstrong has Ewan then go on to talk about how he's done the most awful things. He's created harm. You know, basically the implication is that God's going to judge him harshly for it. He has created evil, and there's no excusing that. And to have that come from a character that loves Logan is just beautiful writing for me. It's like, mwah. This is a loving and understanding and mature character who loves his brother, but this is the smack in the face reality moment. It's, I feel for him, I empathise, I understand where he came from, and in his mind he didn't think he was a bad person, but he's done these awful, awful things. You know, there's a line he says, I loved him, and I suppose some of you did too, in whatever way he would let us. All this pain, right? The fascist as president, these broken children who are now abusing other people, this whole system has come from one broken child, right? One lonely child that was abused and learned it wasn't okay to be vulnerable, and learned that love was pain and power and control, right? That's what he learned, and that's what he put out there into the world. And isn't that the message of Succession? Right? That's what I love so much about this show. Because all of the characters we follow, like the Roy siblings especially, even Connor as well, because we see him a lot more in the later seasons, Jesse Armstrong shows you the qualities in those characters. They have all the qualities to be exceptional human beings who move the human race forward and do great things in the world, right? For example, Roman is very empathetic, and he becomes across as so nasty and edgy, and he says these awful things he doesn't even mean because he's afraid of his own vulnerability. He's very, very compassionate inside. You know, Kerry, for example, when she's being thrown out by Marsha, it upsets Roman. He is the one who is loyal to his father like a loyal dog that keeps getting kicked, right? He is highly emotional. He's also the one of the siblings that, although he's been awful to Connor at times, he notices that Connor is left out, and he tries to bring Connor in. There is this awful sadness in that character that he is very empathetic. He is extremely empathetic, and it hurts him and everyone else, the lengths he goes to to cut that off because it's so strong. Shiv has got good principles. She's tough. You know, she's the only girl in this system of boys, and she has made her way through, and she is charming, and she can be manipulative, and she has got these ideas, and she is intelligent. But she's kind of sold out as well, hasn't she? She's sold her soul to be the cool girl. In the kind of patriarchal system, she's always only going to be valued in as much as she can kind of flirt with and seduce the men around her. I don't mean like in a weird way with her family, but in terms of like being charming and kind of like, well, I'm the cool one and I'm the sister and here I am in this sexist world. You know, if you look at her abuse of Tom, for example, the sad thing is she's like her dad because she loves Tom. I think it's really obvious she loves Tom, but like her father, she kind of shows her love by seeing how much she can hurt somebody to see if they'll still come back, right? And also she's so terrified of the gender roles she's seen. You know, her fear as a woman in that system, it's very Cersei Lannister really, is seeing how her mother was treated, right? She's seeing how the women in Logan's life get treated. She wants to be the exception to that rule. So it's almost like in Tom, she's tried to flip the traditional gender roles and to be that more masculine. I don't mean that as an insult to men to say that it's naturally abusive, but in terms of she is very domineering, and she is very domineering, and she humiliates Tom, and she almost acts like how probably I think Logan probably acted with his wives and the other women around him, right? That's how Shiv treats Tom, and that has put her life into chaos, right? And betrayal. And I mean, I think it's really obvious. She loves him. She loves Tom. She doesn't know how to express love. She has absolutely no idea how to express love. She is her own worst enemy. Like, I could write essays on Shiv, but she could have done great things. Like, imagine if she wasn't tied to that world. Just imagine what Shiv could have done. She's so, like, sparky and charismatic. Right, Connor, his best quality and his worst quality are kind of the same thing. Because Connor's a peacekeeper. You know, in terms of the abuse he suffered, his neglect, he's, you know, he said before, hasn't he, I'm Switzerland, I'm like water, you know, I don't want to rock the boat. And there's a real peacekeepingness to him, there's a gentleness, it's, I want us to be together, I want us to have nice times. But on the other side of that, it's made him complicit, right? So when fascism's coming in, all he's thinking is, anyway, I'm going to do what I always do to survive, which is kind of be Switzerland and not create waves. So he's becoming complicit. This character who we can see is kind, right? Incredibly flawed, but on a personal level is very gentle, is quite a nurturing character. You know, I remember in one of the first episodes, something he said was, I don't know if it was to one of Kendall's kids or if it was to Roman's girlfriend's child. He was talking about, like, buying up water reserves or something, like, just in case of global warming. And he said something to her, like, really indulgently. He was like, but don't worry, because I'll let you have some, don't worry. So the very first thing we see of him is a horrible context, but he's being sweet and gentle and putting a child at ease. And yet he's become complicit in fascism now. And Kendall is the biggest, saddest one of all, I think, this whole trajectory for him. Because I think Kendall's best quality, and it jumps out of him sometimes, is the way he defends his siblings. So for example, when Logan hits Roman, it is Kendall who immediately says, don't touch him. Right, he gets in Logan's face. That is the big brother instinct that he's got going on there. When Tom says to Shiv that, you know, oh, you know, you sound a little unhinged or something, he's like, shut up. That is my sibling, shut up. He's got this kind of protective instinct, and I don't think Kendall is the smartest of the siblings. I think the saddest thing with Kendall is he was groomed up to be Logan's successor, because Logan has most successfully detached him from himself, right? Kendall feels so distant from himself and his own wants and his own needs. And, you know, that's probably why he's an addict, right? He struggled with addiction because he feels distant from his own sense of being. But, you know, the way that Logan treats him versus Roman, and this is just me reading into it, I think that Kendall growing up was the one that was more likely to fight back. I think something that Logan resented in Roman is that Roman loved him so much that he probably didn't fight back, which is tragic and really sad. I think Kendall being the one who does turn on his dad, who does try and get him, Logan wants to raise a killer. And it's so sad that instinct in Kendall, that instinct for justice, right? He has these moments where he suddenly wants to do what's right and he wants to protect the vulnerable person in the room, and it just bursts out of him. But those qualities have gone all wrong and made him into a killer, right? So he is now the killer that his father wanted him to be. And I think, you know, we see him sometimes bullying his siblings as well, and I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward. I think, you know, to kind of wrap this up, because I've been rambling for ages, the tragedy of this show it's kind of, it's hopeful and tragic at the same time. Devastating when you look at the state of the world, fascism, capitalism, all those things. But it's this sort of unmasking, isn't it? It's that conversation that people don't want to have. It's saying that we have a chance. You know, every child in this world, no child is born bad. Logan Roy was not born bad. Kendall, the tragedy of Kendall is that I think he's going to end up really bad, but we've seen that he wasn't always that. If we carry on these generational cycles of pain, it just breeds more and more and more pain, right? The world becomes a worse place. And you know, in Succession, the idea is that sometimes they care for their immediate family, but they don't see themselves as part of the world. But what Succession, the characters don't see it, but what we see as viewers is that all this stuff is connected. We can see the dominoes, right? So all these family traumas and stuff in this family, in this very, very troubled family, are impacting the whole world, are impacting all of America in the show, right? Impacting right across the world. We can see, because we're stepping back, we can see the connections that the characters cannot. We are all connected to each other and we all have a responsibility to each other. That's why I love the show. We have a responsibility and we are able. If we can look after each other, if we don't see each other as ways to make money, as these kind of groups that we're separate from, if you look after the kids, if you protect innocence and you protect vulnerability, and I mean this in the sense that we allow children to be vulnerable and to become adults that are able to be vulnerable and are able to understand their own emotions so they're then able to show empathy for others. If we can do that, we've broken that whole system down. What we're seeing is one family, right, one abusive family and cycle has then somehow spiraled out and is creating more abuse, and it's just spreading. Because, you know, in the show, for example, the fascism that's spreading, the fascism is going to create difficult situations financially. The inequality in the country is going to strain family dynamics, and then more and more people are going to be hurt and they're going to be damaged and they're going to pass it on. It's one of those shows where you want to stop watching it. You can't because you care so much about the characters, but you can see where it's going, and it is a genuine tragedy. Making us empathise with these people who are so distant from our lives on an emotional level, to show us that, are they really so different from someone in our circumstances who's from an abusive family, right? Or someone who's been through trauma. These are the things that connect us and unite us, right? Otherwise the viewers wouldn't care about the Roys, and yet we do. We care about them so much. We care so much about the Roys. The fact that there's something almost hopeful in the fact that although the show is so sad now, right, and it's coming towards the end, our very connection to those people and the fact that it's such a popular show and that so many people are watching it and engaging with it is hopeful in itself, because those are people, I think, who understand. Because at the end of the day, Logan has had all the money that he could possibly want, right? But he died alone. He died in an undignified way. It was like Scrooge's funeral, right? You know, when Scrooge goes back in A Christmas Carol and people are kind of mocking him, etc. You know, Jerry at the funeral. The people he loved the most, and he loved his children so much, are broken people. And now the country is also broken. And his brother loves him, but he's also ashamed of him. And this was somebody who loved him so much. You know, it challenges us to see these people, these monsters in the world, as the vulnerable children that they are. And it does challenge us to show empathy. Doesn't mean to excuse the behaviour, because there's nothing in this writing which excuses the behaviour, and Jesse Armstrong is very clear on that, which can make it a tough watch, but it really helps you to understand, and there is power in that. It breaks the illusion of the Emperor's New Clothes, right? Because in life, if that helps us to look at these people who are so rich and, you know, are set, like the tabloids, for example, let's look at the tabloids and what they do and the pain that they cause. If we can start to think about it in terms of both individuals and systems, if we start to think, you know what, for something to hurt so many people and to have so little empathy, right, and to just be wanting clicks and content, the people there must be, in their own turn, broken people, right? It's just a chain of brokenness. And in that, it takes away some of the power, right? That's what Succession does. Even in the direction, they've said, you know, when they're dressing the sets, they don't want anything to look comfortable. It's extreme wealth, but there's no character. It's wealth, but it's isolating and it's lonely. And this overriding message of the show is that connection, empathy is more important than anything. You know, all of those people, even Logan, right? Logan, who went through that abuse and became a visionary. He could have done amazing things. He might not have been a billionaire, right? He might not have been super rich, but he could have done great things with the talents that he had, he chose not to. And in some ways it was society's fault, and that is the show, isn't it? We reward these people. We are in a society that rewards this kind of behaviour. Anyway, so thank you for sticking around for my Succession take, which should have been a video essay because it would have been better organised, but wanted to get it out of my system. It's like my thing right now, so I'm totally obsessed. I think it ties into what we look at in this channel, so hopefully someone here who watches Succession, even if it's just one person, will watch and enjoy. I don't know. But yeah, thank you for watching. See you really soon. Love you loads. Okay, bye.